I think that we're taught oftentimes to fear the dark or to think of it as bad or to avoid it or to judge it. But in the full acceptance of all the parts of ourselves, balance is like the natural result. So it's so peaceful when we can accept all aspects of ourselves. And I think really a lot of challenges do arise when we start to try to deny or avoid the parts of ourselves that are trying to be heard and do have a voice and have a momentum to them as well that can be directed, if our focus is tight.
Totally. I think, yeah. Hello, hello. Welcome to the Tea On, where we sip tea and we talk about things, preferably things that matter. This is the first episode of the new season, and I can't physically contain my excitement for the fact that I am kicking it off with someone who I am so enamored by, left in awe of, and just I've been led by, I've been inspired by, and I'm just so excited to get to know you on a personal level and to talk a little bit about your journey. So for those of you who don't know, this is Miss Alexandra Love, me getting tripped up on my words, and you just own so many titles. It's honestly just beyond me to be a meditation leader, to be an artist, to be a writer. But how I've come to know you is to be the lead of Beautiful Chorus. Yeah. So first and foremost, I would love if you could just give the audience an introduction to sort of who you are and how you found your way to where you are right now.
Oh, wow. Yes, thank you. Well, thank you for having me here. And how I found my way, I'm still finding my way. I mean, none of us really know what's going on, right? So we just find the best ways to do things that work for us. And I'm still finding that way. I think it's an ever becoming in that sense. But the way that I found the path that I'm currently on is honestly just listening to what I wanted to be doing in my heart and trying to be courageous enough every moment to live in alignment with that. And the more I did, the better it got.
That's beautiful. And honestly, I feel like that is the perfect introduction to a question that I really wanted to ask you, because I think in the spiritual journey that so many people are sort of embarking on quite bravely, there are points where it can at times, at least I found, get a little bit exhausting because of the fact that it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? It's a lifelong journey and you're kind of always sort of being lost and found. And so has there ever been a point where you were like, I kind of just want to shut this awareness off a little bit? Or have you found comfort?
Yeah. It's so much energy, when you start to open up, right? And you ease your own resistance, so much energy is coming through, and it's so different sometimes from the self-oppression that we might be used to. Right. So it is exhausting just because it's a totally different frequency. But I've found that if I take it moment to moment, then it starts to even out. And then, if there are moments when I just need a break, then I'll meditate or go to sleep or do something that just doesn't require a lot of discerning thought. And that always helps. It always helps to right the ship in that way.
Absolutely. Yeah. Give yourself like the time to recalibrate. Do you have like that routine that you turn to if you're ever feeling sort of like off or like I need to raise my vibration or anything?
Yeah, it's just meditation for me at this point, just sitting, calming myself, breathing for a few minutes. And now, I mean, after having done it for so many years, it doesn't take me too long to get into it the way it used to when I was starting. When I was starting, it was, it could be 15, 20 minutes of just repeated meditations, trying to get into that inner peace.
Yeah.
But over time it shifts for sure. So it's easier.
Yeah. I would assume it's kind of like a muscle that you exercise and it kind of just gets easier for sure. Do you ever find that you have to sort of balance, because this is something that's come up for me a lot, is having to balance sort of like my spirituality with like my humanity in a sense, and in a lot of ways they overlap, but in a lot of ways I feel like I kind of need to kind of shut this off and be grounded right now. Do you ever feel like you have to balance the two, or are they just the same?
When you say humanity, what do you refer
Because
to?
the truth is it really could be the same thing, but I think a lot of the times when we work so deeply in the spiritual world, it can be more difficult to like have a casual conversation at a restaurant and have a drink and not be thinking about like, is this affecting my vibration? Am I taking in energies that aren't mine? Those kind of moments.
That's so interesting. I wouldn't then in that case call it spirituality up against the humanity. I would almost call it a sense of insecurity plus humanity, right? Because like true spirituality is like, I know why I'm having this conversation. I know why I'm being the person I'm being. I know I'm making the choices I'm making. And so in that way, I think that our spirit, for me, our spirituality and our humanity are inextricably linked. And but in those moments when our spirituality may not be as practiced,
Mhm.
right? So you're having like a conversation about the weather and it's just not interesting you
I
in
know,
that moment, or it's not doing the thing for you that you want it to do.
right?
Then in those moments I think it's important to reconnect spiritually and just like take a minute, excuse yourself if you need to, take a minute, recenter, and ask like, why am I here? Do I want to be here? Is this the night I want to be having? Do I want to change the conversation? Do I want to change my mind? What do I really feel like doing? And in that way, I think we are the best versions of ourselves, just when we're doing what we truly feel.
Yes, exactly. T. That's the perfect. I feel the exact same way, truthfully. Oh my gosh, there's so many different things. One of the things that I wanted to ask you was I read at one point that sort of like our mission and our purpose in life is to create the spaces that we may have needed when we were younger. And I feel
Mm,
like I look at you and I look at what you guys do and what you guys create, and I feel like that's exactly probably what it is that you were probably doing, right? Creating
yeah.
the arts and the space that you would have needed to feel held. And so I was curious to know if there was anyone that you grew up or were inspired by that sort of made that space for you that you felt inspired by.
I've seen people create that space for themselves. I have a
Mm,
family full of very, very strong, intelligent, independent people. And so
yeah,
it wasn't so much that people created it for me, but being able to witness the example of someone doing it for themselves has been a real blessing, because I did grow up with hardship, and the music that we create now does tend to talk to that younger part of ourselves for sure. Because having needed to get to a place within myself where I could be comfortable, it took a lot of years and it took a lot of figuring things out. So if at this point I can send some messages to people who might be struggling with things that I was struggling with then and make it a bit easier, then that's what I
right.
do. Yeah. So absolutely,
Totally.
you read it right. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, and yeah, I would assume it's almost a practice of inner child healing with the stuff that you guys create.
100%.
Yeah,
Yeah. Inner child listening, inner child accepting, inner child creating, inner child enthusiasm. Yeah, for
I
sure.
love that. So for the people who are sort of in the beginning and embarking in the spiritual journey, or just rather connecting with what it means to live within their highest potential,
Yeah.
is there anything that you would say that maybe people don't really realize or expect when they embark in this really heart-opening journey?
Yeah, is that at first you kind of have to be okay with the percentages changing in your life. So, say you may feel, just for the sake of the conversation, let's say you feel negative often and you want to feel positive more often. That I think something that a lot of people don't realize and that can sometimes dissuade us from even continuing is that as you begin, you kind of still have to be okay with like a 90-10 percentage of 90% negative, maybe,
Right.
and then 80-20, and then 70-30. Like you still have to be accepting and working through the negativity as you're making your way to the changed, contrasting percentages in your life. And that can be difficult because a lot of times people want to embrace positivity and only want to feel positive then from that point on. But it's like, it took a while for us to embrace the negative. So it does take some time to transition to the
Yeah,
positive.
totally. And I think it's important to be okay with it and to be able to sort of, because I found that the most beautiful part of my journey has been sort of like the integration of both sides, like the shadow and the light instead of. And
100%.
so yeah, and that leads me to another question, which is, do you find that you're balancing sort of like those different sides of you, or an
All the
integration
time,
of light and dark, right? Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful.
all
So
the
what's
time,
that
all the time.
experience for you?
It's really cool because I think that we're taught oftentimes to fear the dark, or to think of it as bad, or to avoid it, or to judge it. But in the full acceptance of all the parts of ourselves, balance is like the natural result. So it's so peaceful when we can accept all aspects of ourselves. And I think really a lot of challenges do arise when we start to try to deny or avoid the parts of ourselves that are trying to be heard and do have a voice and have a momentum to them as well, that can be directed, if our focus is tight.
Totally. I think yeah. And I think it's so important because I think those heavier feelings are the ones that have the most important information for us and are really indicative of
Yeah.
like what we need to look at. So I think it's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing to bring into the forefront, because, and I'm curious to know your perspective on this. I feel like a lot of people talk about sort of how this entire realm of spirituality has been a little bit mainstream, a little bit whitewashed sometimes. And I think part of that it comes from people thinking that it's just kind of like light and rainbows. And so it's important to look at like, you know, the shadow work of it. And so, yeah. And do you have a perspective at all on like spirituality sort of becoming this really like digestible, one-dimensional, whitewashed thing? Or
Yeah, I think that it kind of makes sense because oftentimes people will see, let's say you're looking at a guru or someone who you would consider to be enlightened. Oftentimes we're taught to look at and then emulate the external version of that person
Right.
without realizing that they are that being because of who they are within themselves. So then you get people who are trying to copy what they see on the outside and think that that's the way
Yeah.
into the answers. And it just makes sense because no, I don't hear a lot of people teaching about the fact that that's the opposite way to go about any kind of fulfillment or enlightenment. Is you have to start within. So yeah, how I feel about it is just that it makes sense and it's okay. And I think that if people knew that they had another option, that they would choose it because it just feels better. It doesn't feel good to be, you know, one-dimensional spiritually. It's not fulfilling. So I can't assume that people are doing it on purpose.
That is tea. That is a beautiful perspective. That's very true. Yeah, we can only really interact with what we know.
Yeah.
Interesting. And so coming back to Beautiful Chorus, which I can't stress enough. Oh my God, the music is honey to me.
Oh.
And so a lot of what you guys create is based in affirmation. And so I'm curious to know, because a lot of people who are sort of like in the beginning or sort of starting to implement these tools, they'll say things like, you know, my brain doesn't really like believe the affirmations, or it's difficult for me to sit in meditation. So is there any like, you know, tips or guidance that you would provide for someone like that?
Yes, absolutely. It's important to know where we are in a moment individually. Oftentimes we're taught to compare ourselves to other people. So sometimes assessing where we truly are without emotion and just non-judgmentally can be a challenge, but it's important to know like, okay, if I'm frustrated, I am frustrated and I can accept that and that's fine. So if I'm going to do an affirmation, it's all about frequency. And so the main thing that I would say is just find an affirmation that feels like it's at a frequency that's just above where you're at, instead of trying to leap from I feel like absolute garbage to life is beautiful and everything's fine, like, because that kind of a frequency jump is hard to sustain if you're not practiced at it. So yeah, my best advice is to find a mantra that works for you, that feels authentic and close enough to where you are that you can say it without immediately disbelieving it.
Yes. Oh, that is absolutely true. I know, like for instance, like changing the verbiage to like, you know, I am working on loving myself, or I'm walking towards loving myself.
I'm excited to work on myself. I know that I can do it. I'm looking forward to it. And then as you find those things, you can move up and up and up, you know, in frequency. And eventually you will get to life is perfect and everything is amazing. That is, it is a perspective. So
it's honesty, honey. You just have to be honest. I love that. And I will say, whenever, just any Beautiful Chorus song, I feel like outside of the beauty of it, like you just feel such a warm hug, and it's very obvious that there's so much love and light infused into it. And so I'm curious to know, is there like some sort of like meditative routine that you guys go into before recording? And B, like if there's a day where you wake up and you're like, I'm not feeling my best today, I'm feeling, you know, energetically scattered or whatever the case, will you like not record, or how does that go?
It's all very organic. So we don't have a way that we like summon mantras, right? But one of us will send a message to someone else, or I'll hear a melody and put some words to it. It's just we're sort of finding ourselves more and more just in the flow of these things coming through in everyday life. And oftentimes they relate to what we're dealing with in a moment.
Yeah.
You know, so if it's a moment of feeling less than, then, you know, I am perfect as I am. And it just is like, okay, I can do that. I'm singing it to myself. So now let's see if it relates to other people. But yes, if during a day it doesn't feel right, you know, forcing the creative process is the quickest way to make it leave. So we don't force it, and we just do what feels good. But we're also, of course, aware that in a moment, if we're not necessarily feeling it, we can for sure meditate together, laugh together, tell stories together, and get into the feeling that we want in order to be able to create. So we can do that.
Totally. Oh, I
Yeah.
love that. And I'm sure your like emotional journey is probably parallel. I would
Yeah. Oh,
assume, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We all kind of like sync up on the same cycle. I love that. Oh my gosh. And so when you're doing work that is so fulfilling, did you ever at some point have to sort of like redefine what success meant for you because of the fact that you've indulged in a world that I'm sure a lot of people would view as like so radically different, right? To like pursue,
Mm.
yeah, like the world that you're in. Did you ever have to redefine that?
That's so interesting. I think I grew up with my parents telling me to always do my best. So for me,
Yeah.
success has always meant, have I done my best? And if I have, then it's successful no matter how it turns out. So this has been not something that made me redefine what success was, but like it added to it for me
Yeah.
to know that we're able to connect with and help so many people through singing affirmations, and that there are other people out there who can resonate with and benefit from the same things that we sing to ourselves is
Yes.
it's perfect. It's everything.
It's no, it is perfect. And I can't emphasize enough how you guys are truly changing the world and like just shifting a collective frequency, which I think is the most like the most valuable thing in the world. And I would assume people were just sort of like pursuing these like really constructed ways of like, building careers. And I was just like, if you are not following what passion and love and to some degree service looks like for you, you're missing out on, I'm sure, the feeling that you feel every day, which is just a sense of fulfillment. So I'm so grateful, yeah, that you guys embarked on your purpose. And so the last question before I give you some space, if there's anything that you want to share, promote, is there a recent lesson that you have learned that you want to share? Because of course, like we mentioned, the spiritual journey is sort of never ending. And so, yeah, people are constantly evolving.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, something that came to me today was about judgment and how we navigate through our lives. So I made an analogy to myself about the breath, and that when we inhale and we want to hold our breath, oftentimes there's a part right after the inhale where like you sort of sit in holding it, right? And it's like, and you're holding your breath. But if you can inhale and suspend your breath and keep your airway open, but just not take in any more air, then there's less of a weighted feeling to it, right? So the analogy of that for me with judgment was, in moving through life, I think that oftentimes spiritual journeys are more expressed as being moments where like you judge things as good. Like, I see this experience and I can see it as good. I can paint it as good, or this happened to me, or this happened to someone I love, and I can, it was negative, but I can like paint it as good, and I can force myself to look at it as good. And what I was realizing today is that I think there's something that is at times missing, is the understanding that true witness perspective, enlightenment, and the ability to enjoy life, I think, comes from the suspension of judgment, so that you just are accepting things as they are, not to say that you don't want to change them or adjust them to better suit your frequency or what you want in the world, but that you're not necessarily resting on a positive judgment of a thing or a negative judgment of a thing. Because in resting with a positive judgment on a thing or a negative judgment on a thing, then the thing, our love of things then can become conditional.
Yeah. Oh,
Because if the
yes.
thing changes, then my judgment changes. Whereas if we suspend judgment, then however the thing changes and flows, we're still in a state of acceptance and, I think, better understanding. So that came to me earlier today.
A Bible verse came to me earlier today. Right. Okay. Girl, child, I'm about to write some.
I heard how that sounded. I did. That was, yeah.
That was amazing. And I think the most important, I always say, just, yeah, if you have some sort of anchoring in peace, nothing else can really, is there, I said that was the last question, but I just want to know. I feel like a lot of
anchoring in peace so much as an anchoring in acceptance.
Exactly.
That yields peace. Peace comes from that, right? But like the main thing is just openness.
Yes, exactly. And so I'm curious to know, because I think you hear about a lot of people sort of like on this path towards chasing what they define as happiness. And I always say that like happiness is one extreme, on a wide spectrum of emotion that, should never be vilified. It deepens us. And so if you would have to sort of like summarize the emotion that you want to walk towards and feel the most frequently, is that acceptance then, or openness rather than anything else?
For me, those are like states of being, but the emotion that I would put to it is satisfaction.
Yeah, absolutely. Satiated with life.
Yes, just deep satisfaction,
Uh,
deep, ever becoming, ever expanding satisfaction.
oh my gosh. Well, I so much nectar to take from this, Alexandra. You are just such a divine being. And is there anything, are you guys working on anything that you want to promote or anything that's coming up?
Yes, we are going to be releasing some new music in spatial audio coming up, and it'll just be available on all of our streaming sites. Everything will be there. That's where
Oh,
everything is these days.
yeah, true. I will probably be listening to that every single day, 12 times a day, knowing me, because that's all I do. You guys are just constantly like in my subconscious. But thank you so much for sharing your love and your light and your energy with me. It means the literal world. I'm so grateful. For those viewing, of course, please support. Please check them out if you haven't. And yeah, you can check me out at Jasmine Kylene on Instagram. And yeah, I hope you guys walk within your power and are kind to yourselves. Yay.